Welcome to our series, Myers-Briggs for Midlife Career Changers. I'm David from EditBiz.com, and I'm the producer for this series. Our expert is Edythe Richards, Myers-Briggs Master Practitioner and Career Counsellor, specialising in adult career change. Welcome, Edythe.
Thanks, David. I'm glad to be here.
Now, we're going to be talking about the ESTP personality type today, and what ESTPs need to consider in making a career change. We'll first have an overview of the four letters, E, S, T and P, talk about the features of this type, then mention the cognitive functions, which are the middle two letters of the Myers-Briggs type, strengths and weaknesses of ESTPs, and finally, work environments and specific career paths that other ESTPs have found satisfying. Okay, Edythe, let's make a start here. Who are ESTPs?
ESTPs are folks who only live once. In fact, that's probably the phrase that best describes the ESTP life motto, you only live once. They want to experience everything life has to offer, whether it's jetting off to some new destination, or trying exotic food or drink, or bungee jumping, or taking on some new and potentially risky challenge or adventure.
Oh my. Now, Edythe, let's begin with the basics. What does ESTP stand for?
ESTP stands for extroverted. They're energized by the external world of people and things. They tend to be action-oriented and speak freely. Sensing, they pay attention to sensory information, what they can see, hear, taste, touch, and smell in the physical world before paying attention to connections, meanings, and abstract theories. Thinking, they make decisions based on objective, universal principles and logic before focusing on personal motives and compassion, and they choose truthfulness over tactfulness. And perceiving, they prefer a flexible approach to life rather than a structured approach, and they tend to be spontaneous and adaptable.
That's great, Edythe. Now, for our listeners, this information isn't meant to put you in any kind of box. The Myers-Briggs is based on the idea that people have preferences to how they live life and interact with the world. For example, we all use both extroversion and introversion, but there's one that we prefer to use, and this one comes much more naturally to us. It's sort of like choosing a flavour of ice cream. Most of us prefer either chocolate or vanilla, though we will enjoy both.
That's an excellent analogy, David, since I'm a fan of ice cream. This is a good place to mention just for a moment the theory behind these four letters. In the Myers-Briggs community, we also use the concept of handedness. We're each naturally right-handed or left-handed. With practice, we can get better at using our non-preferred hand, but it'll never be our go-to hand to use, and it'll probably never feel completely natural. We use our dominant hand without thinking about it, so it's natural for us to do that. It works this way with our preferred functions too. So we're not trying to pigeonhole anyone or to predict behavior. That's not what this is about. What we're talking about is meant to be a general guideline for career development, and it's my hope that our ESTP listeners will find at least some of these points useful and will be able to implement them into their job search.
This makes sense. They sound like fun and fun-loving people. So I'm quite keen to learn a little bit more.
And I'm excited to talk about them. Indeed, they are energetic, active problem solvers. They're interested in everything going on around them, activities, food, clothes, people, the outdoors, and they love to try most things. They have a built-in restlessness and fly by the seat of their pants. This is because they learn best by doing rather than studying or reading. Many ESTPs will therefore plunge into things and trust their ability to be resourceful. As we mentioned, you only live once, and it's up to each individual to make the most of life. ESTPs can get very wrapped up in living life in the moment because that's all one can be sure of. And they're often seen as pragmatists, people who can troubleshoot by quickly sizing things up and reacting to them efficiently. For the most part, ESTPs prefer to deal flexibly with what is rather than planning ahead. They don't naturally see future implications or read between the lines to discover more subtle meanings. Focusing too much on either the past or the future makes us less effective in the present. For the ESTP, you're meant to work hard and you're meant to play hard.
This brings to mind the saying, better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Well, that could be another motto for ESTPs. Yes, they'll be more likely to believe that too much focus on the past or future makes us less effective in the present.
As they say, life is about working hard and playing hard. At least that's one way of looking at it.
It is, but not everyone shares this viewpoint. ESTPs can be controversial both as leaders and workers. Not everyone will appreciate their risk-taking, entrepreneurial, fly now, pay later style. When given the opportunity to do in an action-oriented, unstructured, yet challenging environment, they can be capable, lively team members, skillful negotiators, and tactical leaders.
Your average ESTP sounds like quite a character. I imagine they like to be in the spotlight too, or at least they're not afraid of being in the spotlight. I'm thinking perhaps younger ESTPs especially might be misinterpreted and seen as showing off.
Well, if they do come across as show-offs, and yes, this is likely with ESTPs, it's probably unconscious. For such action-oriented people, ESTPs have motivations beyond their actions, which they may or may not be conscious of. If you ask an ESTP, why did you do that? And the ESTP answers, I don't know. He probably does know and doesn't want others to know his intentions. On the other hand, he may just do what he wants to do without thinking of the consequences or about other people. And here you're right, David. We often see this kind of behavior from younger ESTPs. They firmly believe that actions speak louder than words. They'd much rather be doing something than lounging around talking about doing it. If they're active, talking or chatting can be integrated into the activity.
I'm not sure why, but I keep thinking about sports all the time here. Could a lot of athletes be ESTPs?
Absolutely. Every ESTP I've ever known has been involved with sports, either as a participant or an active spectator. It's part of that sensory world. Physical challenges come easily to them, and they do get wrapped up in the moment. They can be very competitive, but at the same time, they won't dwell on the misery of losing if it does happen. ESTPs also get caught up in the sensory world of food and drink. In my own experience, ESTPs I've known are foodies or really enjoy trying new and strange foods and experiencing drinking cultures and all that goes along with it.
So, they're party animals.
They're fun to be around. They're so spontaneous and quick-witted and really are the life of the party. They can come up with these hilarious one-liners and jokes, but they can get themselves into trouble with their lack of tact. I have an ESTP friend who, when he was younger, would crack jokes, a lot of jokes of a sexual nature that offended people, and he didn't realize his faux pas until they were out of his mouth. And of course he felt terrible because it was completely unintentional for him to offend people. His nature just wasn't to be serious. In fact, he hated serious conversations about politics or the economy, and he would just say things to lighten the mood at the wrong times, in the wrong places, sadly. Fortunately, with time, he's learned from his mistakes, and he's quite a delightful person to be around now.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. We all make mistakes and we all have things to work on. With that said, Edythe, let's now talk about the cognitive functions. For our listeners, cognitive functions refer to the middle two letters of one's Myers-Briggs type. This is essentially the heart of who we are, how we obtain information, and how we make decisions based on that information. For ESTPs, we'll be talking about sensing and thinking. One is dominant and one is auxiliary or secondary. If I'm not mistaken, Edythe, ESTPs are dominant sensing. Is that right?
Very good, David. You are correct. ESTP's dominant function is extroverted sensing. Our dominant function is our so-called favorite function. It's the one that's first to develop, and it's the one we rely on for our overall functioning. If we recall, extroverted means externally, what's going on in the physical world rather than underneath the surface. Sensing means the five senses, what we experience with our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and our sense of touch. This function draws energy and enjoyment from people, objects, and events in the immediate environment. And as a result, it's a function that's keenly aware of the physical surroundings, and people who use it are very connected to their external environments. This is where the love of physical activity, of food and drink, and all the sensory experiences come from, as well as that live for today attitude. Extroverted sensors aren't as focused on the future or what's happening behind the scenes. Instead, they're doers, movers and shakers, and bring excitement everywhere they go. A couple of interesting features: they have a knack for getting to the core of the matter, cutting through all the red tape or extraneous information and coming up with a practical solution. And they also have an accuracy and reliability in observing and reporting objective facts. On the downside, users of this function tend to be impatient and need a lot of external stimuli, or they may become bored. They don't do well listening to long monologues with lots of detail, and they don't naturally understand the world through other people's interpretations. They need to experience it firsthand themselves. In doing so, they go with the flow.
I see. And as you said earlier, they're not naturally focused on the consequences of their actions because they're so wrapped up in the moment.
Right, and this can sometimes cause them to be perceived as shallow when the reality is that that's far from the truth.
Let's talk about the auxiliary or secondary function. This is the second one to develop, and we use it with our dominant function. One is used to obtain information, and the other is used to make decisions based on that information. For ESTPs, extroverted sensing is used as the information gathering function. So that means thinking is used to make decisions based on the information they've obtained. Right, Edythe?
Right. Thinking, as we recall, is the function that makes decisions based on objectivity and logic, not on the impact on people. For ESTPs, thinking is internal, so we call this function introverted thinking. People who use this function want to make sure that information makes sense to them. So it's about how ideas and objects work, rather than how practical or useful those ideas and objects are. Introverted thinking deconstructs and disassembles various levels of thought, concepts, and ideas in order to gauge a sense of their inner workings and how they function. A powerful aspect of this function is the ability to remain focused on the analytical tasks, breaking them down into subtasks and classifying them for easy retrieval. In doing so, they're able to come up with unconventional insights and perspectives, as well as cut through denial and the so-called conventional wisdom, presenting new conclusions in a concise and logical manner. Users of this function may wrongly assume that their framework isn't shared by others, and they may also wrongly assume that because their conclusions are so logical, they're obvious and won't be challenged by others. In this sense, they may overlook the importance of diplomacy and relationships.
Now, this is where your earlier story is really making sense from a personal point of view. It's reminding me of a guy I used to play football with. In America, you might call that soccer. This player was always in a good mood, but he was always trying to play tricks on our teammates, just trying to get people riled up for his own enjoyment. We'd always call him out on it, and he'd admit it, but in a really charming way. In fact, he was so nice about it, it was hard to be mad with him. It was almost as if he completely forgot what he did, and he would just move on to whatever it was that grabbed his attention. Now, does he sound like an ESTP to you, Edythe?
It certainly sounds possible. This is a good place to remind our listeners, though, of the danger of assuming someone is a certain Myers-Briggs type. We want to remember that the purpose of taking the Myers-Briggs or any psychometric assessment is for better self-awareness. Although there are certain qualities of people with ESTP preferences, some of what we're talking about in this podcast may not apply to you. It may therefore be helpful to consider each one in terms of your experience by asking yourself, is this true for me? You're still a unique individual with a unique background and unique interests.
Okay, since we're focusing on career development today, let's take a step back and have a bit of a recap here. Cognitive functions of ESTPs. Edythe, let's relate them to career development directly, so we can really make this talk worthwhile.
Sure, because ESTPs are dominant extroverted sensing, they'll do well to pursue positions or work environments that allow them to explore the sensory world and make use of their practical intelligence to solve real-world concrete problems. We see many ESTPs in careers such as athlete, chef, and also chiropractor and physical therapists. We also see many doing great performing work, actors and musicians. ESTPs aren't going to be as inspired sitting in an office all day, just like as children, they probably weren't inspired sitting in a classroom all day. In fact, ESTPs are one of the types most likely to leave higher education settings, not due to a lack of intelligence, but to a lack of extroverted sensory stimulation in many academic environments. In reality, many ESTPs can get easily caught up in the partying lifestyle that many colleges and universities here in the U.S. have, which without proper balance will take precedence over studying abstract theories in the library. Their auxiliary introverted thinking helps to balance ESTPs to a degree. This function helps them to evaluate all the sensory information they take in, and though they'll respond with action, they'll know far more than they're able to express. This often manifests in crisis situations. They're able to calculate angles as well as sustain a successful outcome. A practical example of this, thinking through a problem or troubleshooting and coming up with a very clear, logical, and emotion-free analysis of where the problem areas are and then fixing them quickly.
I have to say, I like that line, they'll know far more than they're able to express. That is very interesting. So it sounds like ESTPs are experts at grasping and responding to the needs of the moment. They also sound like down-to-earth, good-natured folk who take things as they are rather than imposing a should or must of their own. Now, this brings us to the strengths section. What other strengths can you mention for the ESTP type?
As you said, they're straightforward, pragmatic, and assertive. ESTPs want things to happen quickly. They enjoy crises, diving right in and skillfully navigating through them while presenting a realistic assessment of what's actually happening. As we previously discussed, they're action-oriented. ESTPs enjoy a life filled with many activities besides work. If life becomes too routine, they may add unusual, often physical, for example, hand gliding, whitewater rafting, or big game hunting activities that call for quick, effective handling of unpredictable, difficult, and often tense situations. They may even retire early to pursue more activities they consider fun. Along these lines, they're gregarious, fun-loving, and spontaneous, and they're also adventurous risk-takers. ESTPs love life and immerse themselves in it. They probably have a lot of interests, whatever is the flavor of the moment, and they're always finding a way to jazz life up. I call them the ultimate realists because they're masters at getting to the heart of the matter and have a low tolerance for unrelated theory. They're also doers who make decisions confidently based on the facts. Therefore, ESTPs tend to be good at making accurate and efficient assessments of current situations, working with a variety of people, making quick connections with others, noticing and remembering facts and details, public speaking, sales, and negotiating, starting projects with energy and exciting others to participate, and using their hands and tools efficiently and skillfully.
There's something to be said for having someone on a team that has a get-it-done attitude. I think every team or organisation really needs that. But like everyone, ESTPs have their weaknesses. Edythe, what are some common weaknesses for this type?
Every Myers-Briggs type has the potential to overuse their preferences, and one way this happens is when an individual is under a great amount of stress. In these cases, they may act out in ways that are unlike their usual style. One way ESTPs lose out is due to an over-reliance on improvisation and a laissez-faire mindset. While ESTPs may say, "I work better under pressure," the fact is that ESTPs may avoid planning ahead more than absolutely necessary because they prefer to live so totally in the present moment. This can result in a frantic, disorganized pace when deadlines do come up, which invited emergency-like complications. This apparent flakiness is not only frustrating for more structured types, but it can be disastrous to productivity. ESTPs are naturally skeptical of things they don't have first-hand experience with, but in these situations they may need to look beyond the quick fix and plan ahead, considering the wider ramifications of their ability to improvise. Similarly, a marked feature of many ESTPs is a dislike of routine and mundane details of life. ESTPs may present as restless and impatient. They can be oblivious to procedures, protocol, and this lack of orderliness can be irritating for others in their lives. Finally, ESTPs may be funny and charming, but they may appear insincere, too blunt, or uncaring towards the needs of others, especially when relying too much on humor rather than genuine emotion when dealing with others. This may happen if they neglect or forget responsibilities or previous commitments in order to take advantage of another opportunity. They're often surprised to learn that they've offended someone, but in doing the things they want to do without regard to social conventions that others may expect, they're setting themselves up for failure. Some ESTPs may therefore need to learn and accept that other people value different things than they do. Under extreme stress, which for an ENTP usually involves losing their freedom or having to abide by excessive rules and regulations, they may become very defiant and very angry. In these situations, they may feel empty inside and seek revenge by mocking things that other people hold dear to the point of ridiculing others and causing a scene. They might unconsciously be trying to rekindle the hollowness they feel inside while eliminating their real or perceived barriers to their freedom. Some things ESTPs need to watch out for: forgetting, resisting, or ignoring the rules and procedures, speaking before thinking things through carefully, taking on too many projects, accepting things at face value without looking beyond the obvious, and being too casual with authority and insensitive to others.
Now, I know that you advocate everybody learning to use their non-preferred functions in order to not only work on our weaknesses but gain healthy balance in our careers and lives. Do you have any specific strategies that can help ESTPs with this?
I do. Gaining confidence in our non-preferred functions can always help us work on our problem areas. Our non-preferred functions are the ones that don't appear in our 4-letter Myers-Briggs code, but they are functions that we use. We just typically don't like to use them and therefore don't have as much confidence in them. For ESTPs, these are feeling and intuition. As we get older, we do learn the importance of using these functions, and using them does become easier, but it's never going to be our preference to use them.
I see. So for ESTPs, understanding their feeling and intuition can help them gain better balance and then use their strengths more effectively.
That's right. For my ESTP listeners who have a need to develop your feeling side, here are a couple suggestions. In a work meeting, listen hard to what others are saying and the different points of view. Find something positive that you agree with in each viewpoint and then focus on the real and positive about that person's participation. Be sure to watch each person's body language and adjust your interactions based on what he or she is feeling. Another idea, in conflict situations, try to find areas you agree upon with the other person before you focus on resolving the problem. Give the other person the opportunity to state his or her opinion and then practice listening to their point of view, considering the emotional impact your decision may have on him or her. To work on intuition, and this isn't going to be popular, practice meditation and set aside regular times to meditate. Allow yourself to just sit for half an hour and just be. It's also important for many ESTPs to balance their spontaneous and sometimes reckless natures with planning and commitment. Learning to appreciate structure and follow through, imagining the consequences of their actions, these are important developmental needs for ESTPs. Being mindful and being aware of the risks of your actions and impulses is the first step in getting a handle on them.
Yes, I can see that many of these strategies might be difficult at first for ESTPs to implement. But as you say, we all have potential pitfalls. One that comes to mind here is that impulses come in the form of a resistance to setting priorities and developing and sticking to a long-term career plan in favour of instant gratification. At the same time, ESTPs who spend too much time in this abstract, intuitive world aren't going to be at their best. If something isn't worth their time, they'll move on to the next thing. So it's important that they're in a position and in an environment where they can be actively engaged.
Very true, and this brings us to workplace and career needs for ESTPs.
Excellent. A quick reminder, ESTPs, like all the other Myers-Briggs types, will be most drawn towards careers that make use of their natural preferences. When they're able to be themselves most naturally, they're more likely to be energized and satisfied, and meet similar people, contributing to their career satisfaction. Edythe, let's hear about the ESTP workplace needs.
In order for their careers to be satisfying, ESTPs need the opportunity to have personal and direct involvement with projects where, at the end of the day, tangible results of efforts are seen. The freedom to work in a relaxed and friendly environment with opportunities to interact throughout the day with a variety of different people, an environment with a minimum of rules and restrictions, to be in charge of his or her time and responsible for his or her actions. The opportunity to use logical reasoning to determine the best and most efficient solutions to tactical problems, and a constantly changing and interesting environment with plenty of excitement, challenge, and fun ways to respond to immediate challenges.
These are no surprise, given what we've learned about the entertaining and gregarious nature of ESTPs. Now, Edythe, let's move on to specific career paths.
Right. I'd like to remind our listeners that if you don't see your intended career path on this list, please don't panic. We'll find successful ESTPs in all fields.
Good point.
Careers most often selected by ESTPs fall into 5 categories: quote-unquote action-oriented, civil service, finance, entertainment and sports, technical and trades, and business.
Let's begin with action-orientated, civil service.
Careers in this area include police officer, firefighter, paramedic, pilot, and investigator. These are satisfying because they offer a high degree of action, variety, and the opportunity to interact with many people from different backgrounds. Many also require the ability to think and react rapidly to changing situations and to keep cool under stress. As we've discussed, the ESTP's naturally curious and observant nature leads them to make realistic assessments of problems, especially in crisis situations.
Yes, these skills of observation will make them really good at analysing and assessing people's motives, or a series of events too. So these career paths, I'm sure, aren't a big surprise to our ESTP listeners. Edythe, the next category, please.
And next we have finance, stockbroker, banker, investor, personal financial planner, auditor, and insurance sales are options here. This world is often interesting to ESTPs, especially when it involves rapidly changing situations and contains a certain amount of risk. A love of excitement and risk-taking makes ESTPs natural gamblers, and often they do well at playing the stock market. They're realistic and pragmatic people enjoying careers that require problem solving, even if it means using unconventional approaches. Many of these areas of finance include lots of interaction with the public, and ESTP's friendly and outgoing nature helps them to meet people and acquire new clients.
Okay, what's next?
Next is technical and the trades. Careers here include builder, contractor, surveyor, farmer, chef or cook, aircraft mechanic, engineer, electrical, civil, industrial, or mechanical, logistics and supply manager, manufacturer, and marine biologist. The appeal of the trades to ESTPs is the ability to work with real things and to use tools in efficient, economical, and skillful ways. ESTPs usually have good mechanical understanding and work well with their hands. They like working for themselves as long as they can have the opportunity to work around other people. They enjoy the physical and active nature of these careers, including the sometimes high pressure of working within tight time frames.
Now, the next one is the athletics and entertainment arena, where many ESTPs would love to be, or if that isn't a realistic career option, they'll find ways to incorporate this into their lives.
Yes, very true indeed. Careers such as news sportcaster or news reporter, promoter, tour or travel agent, bartender, dancer, auctioneer, professional athlete or coach and fitness instructor, or a trainer provide lots of fun, which is a critical element in career satisfaction for ESTPs. ESTPs live for the here and now and enjoy work that allows them to be active and lively. They're natural promoters, yet also enjoy the adventure and thrill of a performance. Many ESTPs are sports fans and excel in jobs where sports are central, including competing with and training others. They prefer to work around other people as much as possible and can be charming and persuading in many of these recreational roles.
Okay, Edythe, the last category, please.
The last category that we'll discuss is business. Careers here include entrepreneur, real estate broker or agent, land developer, and retail or car sales. Let's be honest, most ESTPs find the world of business too restrictive and slow-paced. However, these particular careers offer more flexibility in terms of schedule, personal freedom, and variety. Plus, ESTPs enjoy the elements of risk found in starting a new business enterprise or being a developer. Because they're good at sensing subtle cues from other people, they make excellent salespeople and usually enjoy the negotiation process. Similarly, they enjoy the competitive nature of insurance and auto sales, and they do well with systems that offer incentives and prizes for sales goals.
These career paths really do hit upon the very things that ESTPs need in their lives. And as a gentle reminder to our ESTP listeners, to be successful, it is important to develop appropriate balance. We know that when you're on track, you're experiencing as much of life as possible, with an unending variety of sensory experience. Edythe, any final thoughts?
I'd like to remind our listeners that you won't have the same career or life journey as other ESTPs. You're a unique individual with unique attributes. We've discussed career paths that you as an ESTP may find satisfying, along with the reasons why.
Excellent. Now, you've got some sources I believe you'd like to mention.
Yes, though much of the information in this podcast comes from my own knowledge of and experience using the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, some additional sources that can be helpful for further reading: Type Talk by Otto Kroger, Life Types by Jean Kumaro and Sandra Hirsch, and Do What You Are by Paul Teeger and Barbara Barron-Teeger.
That's great, Edythe. Thanks once again for sharing your expertise. I'm David from editbits.com, and you've been listening to Myers-Briggs for Midlife Career Changers, episode ESTP. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and of course our website, where you can sign up for our newsletter at www.atopcareer.com. Feel free to share this file with your friends. Until next time. MBTI and Myers-Briggs are registered trademarks of the MBTI Trust.